You're listening to Authors First on the Artists First World Radio Network, artistsfirst.com. Tony K in the studio. Thanks, audience, for joining us worldwide. All broadcasts available free on demand. Visit the artistsfirst.com homepage frequently for updated guests and for broadcasts covering a broad range of topics. This hour on Authors First, it's my privilege to introduce creative artist and author Sheila Levine. SheilaLevine.com, the website. I love it when authors do that. And her book title, Simple Truths. Let's give a warm Artist First welcome to our guest. How do you do, Sheila?
Hi, how are you? I'm fine, thank you very much.
Wow, what fun you've been having, and you enjoy being around creative people anyway, right? I mean, music, literature, art. This is a part of the parcel fabric of who you are.
Yes, I think that's true. For many years, I lived in New York City. And I would say when I did live in New York that I was at the ballet maybe 3 times a week, and at concerts, etc. But then I moved to a small island in the Caribbean called Vieques, where I've lived for about 25 years. And there's not a great deal of what we would call culture there, but there is a lot of creativity, a lot of artists and other writers and people like that.
And the weather, so much nicer.
Yes, the weather, it's nothing but great weather, except for the few short times during the year when we may get a big storm. The weather is absolutely ideal. But even more than the weather, Vieques gave me, because it's a population of 10,000, gave me an opportunity to have the kind of expansive time that writers need. I think most writers feel when they get up in the morning and they go to their desks and they start writing, they don't want to have anything interfere. Now, no time limits. You don't have to be at lunch at 1 or make dates in the afternoon. You just write as long as you feel like it. And that expansive time is awfully important to creative people.
It really is a labor of love, of devotion, self-sacrifice, focus. You have to be in for the long haul.
Yes, you do have to be in for the long haul. In fact, it's about 20 years between having novels published. Simple Truths was published about 20 years ago, and my newest novel, Musical Chairs, was just published about a month ago. So that is a long time, but it doesn't really seem like a long time. In addition to all of the things you mentioned, it's kind of an addiction, being creative, being an artist or a writer. I think it's just something that one does, and
you have
don't really
to do
think
it.
Too much about the right. You don't think too much about the result. You don't worry every minute if you're going to get published or bought or whatever. You just kind of go into a trance and write.
It's like air.
It is. That's exactly right.
And you don't really think of yourself as, well, I'm an author. I need to get busy here. Or do you?
No, not especially, although one does worry when the muse is not visiting and you're kind of sitting there at your desk and it's not coming the way it normally comes. But then that short period of time passes and you get back to work. And when you're actually writing, it is a little bit like being in a trance, actually. It's just, there's nothing like it, really. Nothing. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, I like so much what I've written that I actually take the pages to bed with me at night. It's kind of silly,
sure.
but
no,
I just don't want
really.
to be apart from them because they're so much a part of me.
Yeah, well, if it takes a while to write a book, you're really into the characters, the way that they think, the things that they're feeling. You're connected to them in a personal way, like they're your friends.
That's very true. They are your friends. They're your people. You think about them almost all the time. It's almost not necessary to have what most people call a social life because you're living with your characters and the situations. Simple Truths is about a refusenik, a pianist who's a refusenik in the Soviet Union. They won't allow him to leave because he's Jewish, and about a young woman who works in the Soviet Jewry movement in America, and how she helps him to emigrate. that is a story I know well because I worked for the National Conference on Soviet Jewry for many years, and those were the days when they would not let Jews emigrate from the Soviet Union. But you just live with these characters and the situations, and it seems to fill your days and fill your nights quite adequately.
Write what you know. I'm sure that the first book was much of an expression of the frustration and the liberation, the joy that you experienced through those repetitive cycles of attempting to bring people from the society they're living into a free society. That's
very, very true. Right, what you know is very true. For the second novel, the one that was just published, Musical Chairs, is a political novel. And for many years after I left what's called organized Jewish life, the Jewish civil service, I worked in politics. I was a finance director for many politicians. And the second novel, Musical Chairs, is about two women who were running against each other in the primary in New York City for the Senate. Each of the women has a secret, which, if known, would be a kind of deal breaker, perhaps even a career breaker. And the book is about how these two women, coming from very different parts of life, got to the place they are at, where they can run against each other for the Senate, and what happens when they find out each other's secrets. And which is of course what very, very vital today. If you just think about Hillary and this recent flap about her emails, a big secret, now it's exposed. How much damage is it going to do? Well, it's that kind of thing that I'm writing about, and I know it from the inside because I worked on many, many campaigns. It's a fascinating area to work in politics on the one hand. On the other hand, it is also very frustrating and kind of scary, especially nowadays when everybody is looking for dirt kind of on the other candidates. So this novel, Musical Chairs, deals with the whole situation of politics, but especially about two women running against each other and the tensions that causes, because each of them wants to appeal to the woman's vote, and each of them wants to knock the other one out. So that, anyway, I think it's pretty entertaining myself.
Well, the mantra used to be, it's the economy, stupid, right? But today, it seems like social interests have taken the forefront, such as homosexuality or scandals or feminism,
Well, certainly scandals are always popular, that's for sure, without a doubt. And I've been with many candidates who have had many scandals of their own. Some of them have had maxi scandals of their own. And it's kind of heartbreaking because not all scandals tell the real truth about what happened. In many cases, the candidates actually behaved quite innocently and did not realize that it would be interpreted in a way that was detrimental to them. As to what's important at any given moment, and a lot of that is out of the control of any candidate. Always the economy is important. Foreign affairs are important, more important at some times than at other times. But scandal and fundamental personality traits, character traits, are increasingly important. I think we've become very aware that some of the people we have elected in the past did not have very sterling character traits. And I think people are looking more at character than they have in the past. But we'll see what happens in this upcoming election for president. I'm not altogether convinced that the people who seem to be the most popular now are the ones who are actually going to end up running. I mean, who would have ever thought Obama would have...
A nobody. Out of nowhere.
Nobody, exactly.
With no record.
And yet he excited, a major part of the American
hope
population.
And change. Hope and change.
Hope and change.
We wanted to fire them all. Is what we wanted.
And I think we still do.
I think we do too. Yeah, I think we definitely want to fire them all, and that's okay. But for political satire, for authors, this world of espionage, the underworld of government that the general public never sees, the scandal, the sex, the money laundering, the things that the payback, the payola, you're sort of bringing all of that together in your latest book, and you're receiving 5-star reviews. Congratulations on
Thank you.
on Musical Chairs. When did you get the idea for? I mean, I think in reference to politics, what a great title, with everyone jumping from Republican to Democrat and Democrat to Republican and so forth.
Well, politics is a zero-sum game. Somebody wins, somebody loses. There's no second place. So, and I had worked for many years for Elizabeth Holtzman, who had been a congresswoman and was the comptroller of the city of New York. This book is not about her, as a matter of fact, not about her race at all. There's no resemblance to anything that she ever did. But I suppose working for a woman candidate, as I did for many years, she ran for the Senate and lost a couple of times, gave me the idea about two women running against each other and what that would be like, because it's hard enough when a man runs against a woman, but when two women are running, they're vying for the same portion of the electorate. And I'm not sure how much the general public is aware of the fact that almost really every candidate breathing today running for office hires what's called an opposition research firm, which is a nice name for people who dig up the dirt on the other candidate. It's a serious business, and it's a very lucrative business. And there are whole firms devoted to people who look into the backgrounds of the opposition candidate. And they also look into the backgrounds of the candidate who has hired them to make sure. That's what's happening with Hillary now. You read that she is being vetted. She pays people to do opposition research on her so that she won't be caught unawares when the opposition actually finds out something about her. She'll be prepared to be able to reply to it. But and there's quite a bit about opposition research in this book, because it's a kind of fascinating way to make a living, digging up dirt, as it were, on people running for office, some of whom may be perfectly fine people, but have perhaps made early mistakes when they were younger, or did something they shouldn't have but didn't realize it was wrong, etc. And that's basically what happens to my characters. They both have secrets which neither of them wants to have exposed. But in the end, these days, everything is exposed. And how you handle your opponent's what could be a career breaker secret is also a measure of one's own character. So it's an interesting world, politics, very interesting.
It is, and yet you've made comparisons. You've brought together personalities that have a universal sense, and that regardless of who might be in power today, it all sort of will fit anyway.
That's true. That's true.
I like that part of the book, that, regardless of where you might lean politically, it covers all of the bases.
Very true. It's a tough business. I mean, if one were going to advise young people to go into politics, they better have a strong stomach and a thick hide, because it's a nasty, tough business. And if you can come through with having your character intact and not having done too many terrible things, you can consider yourself lucky.
Yeah, and if you have the right, it's one thing to be principled, but you have to have the right principles.
You have to have the right principles, and you have to have the savvy to know how to. Nobody gets elected today, and I mean nobody, without cutting some deals somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
With a union, with police, with all kinds of special interest groups. There is no one who gets elected who hasn't had conversations with a wide variety of groups that are special interest groups. Now, it just depends on which special interest group you lean towards, and whether or not you can avoid making promises that A, you may not be able to keep, and B, may not be in the best interest of the public. It's a trickier business than it ever was before. It's too bad that people can't just get on television, debate one another, and have it done that way. But that isn't the way it happens in America these days.
Audience, if you followed my advice earlier, you're already at SheilaLevine.com to learn more about our guest. And musical chairs, politics, sex, scandal, secrets, money, New York. I guess New York. Simple truths, Holocaust, suicide, Jewish, Soviet, divorce, survivors, and may I add New York, or no?
Yeah, sure.
And so this is the area that you enjoy, creating the suspense, the thrill, the drama, the personalities, the characters in the book Musical Chairs. That's a lot to get into, right? I mean, that's the politics, sex, scandal, secrets, money in New York.
It is. It's a lot to get into, and I really don't think anybody who had not worked in politics for some length of time could
do this.
Could do it, right? I mean, you just have to be aware of certain things like opposition research and the effect it has, and how staff of people who are running for office talk to each other, and how they leak to the press, and they try to make it appear that they haven't leaked to the press, but that the press has gotten the story from some other place. All of those things, some of them quite subtle, I think you have to have lived through it, or it'd be awfully difficult to write about it. You really wouldn't know about it, actually.
Well, and if you know in your mind and you say, hey, it's the Big Apple, we're talking about New York here, then a supermodel who is widowed, who now is running with a congressman, makes sense.
Right.
Because they're clubbing it. They're going to the same venues. You're seeing NBA stars, movie stars, New York Times writers, other authors. It's just a melting pot of creative talent from lots of different perspectives, and you're able to glean on that and create Musical Chairs.
Right. Yes. Thank you. Yes, I was, and it came quite naturally because I know the world of politics pretty well.
I love the photograph on the cover, both covers, Musical Chairs and Simple Truths. Simple
yes, they've
Truths.
got quite high marks, I must say.
Yeah, they're both stunning and graphic in the sense they draw you into the book. You can't wait. You're like, oh man, this is the bomb.
I hope so. That's the reaction that we've had.
Congratulations!
And I'm very pleased.
Yeah, congratulations on both. Did you re-release Simple Truths? Or
yes, Simple Truths was re-released at the same time that Musical Chairs was published.
How nice!
I felt, and the publisher felt that it was a sensible thing to do. Many people now are perhaps not so aware of what the situation was in the 70s with Soviet Jews and the difficulty they had in trying to emigrate to Israel. And this is a book about that, as well as about a survivor of the Holocaust, Susan Warner, who is the heroine of the book, and how she herself is so conflicted about the Holocaust that she does not want to be identified as a survivor.
Wow.
But of course she is one. So it's a complicated book about both Soviet Jewry and about the Holocaust and the survivors of the Holocaust and how they relate to the world, having lived through one of the most cataclysmic events that the world has ever known.
You've I don't want to say been privileged, but in a sense honored in that you've heard firsthand and been involved firsthand at helping bring others to this country.
Yes, that's right. In fact, I went to the Soviet Union on any number of occasions. I was even a member of the press on the Nixon-Kissinger Summit 3 trip. And not on that occasion, but another occasion when I went to the Soviet Union, I was actually detained by the KGB. Which this is not an experience I would recommend to anyone. So I had quite a lot of fabulous experiences, and as I've always said, Soviet Jewry did more for me than I ever did for it. Taught me an awful lot about life and about people who hunger for liberty and freedom, and fortunately, in the end, it was quite successful. Almost all the Jews who wanted to leave were able to leave, but it was quite a struggle in those days.
Sheila, in both cases, it's a reflective process through your own lived experiences of meeting people, living, going, writing. in your career and where you were situated, and now being able to reflect back and really pull all that together. Are there similarities then, or was there enough distance between the two books? Or
no, I think that, except for some universal truths about human beings, I don't think the books are similar at all. And as a matter of fact, I've just started a new book, which is about a man who's an embezzler, actually, and that is not going to be similar to either of these. Now, of course, as I said, human beings have certain fundamental characteristics, and I guess those come through in whatever one writes about. But each of these books, I mean, they're separate entities, which is, I guess, just how I happen to do it. Lots of people don't do that. They write books, with the same main characters, and and they use the same characters, time and time again. That's not how I view it. It's like I'm moving forward now. I'm going to write this new book about an embezzler and what effect that has on his friends and his loved ones, etc. Experience I actually personally lived through, and that will be quite different from either of these two.
The tragedy. There's, you have love, passion, interest, desire for power, for acceptance. Egos are at play, and those who've risen to political power obviously have big egos.
They absolutely do. Just as I said, you can't really get elected these days without cutting a few deals here and there, etc. There's no one that runs for office who gets elected who is not different from other people in that he or she has a phenomenally large ego. And politicians really do believe they know best. They're not kidding around about it. It may not be our best, but it is what they believe is best, and they believe it so strongly that they're going to bend everybody else to their will. It's interesting. People who go into politics are very interesting, and I've been very, very friendly with people who've constantly lost races. And to me, it's interesting because often they're the nicest people, but they lost precisely because they were the nicest people. Their opponents weren't so nice, and they won. And in some cases, their opponents even ended up in jail after they were elected. In one case I know of, he had actually committed crimes to get elected, and he actually went to jail. And his opponent, who's a really nice guy, couldn't get himself elected. And that's just the way it is in America today.
Yeah, do you discuss transparency in musical chairs? Sorry, I had to throw that in.
Okay, that's all right.
Transparency, I mean, come on. These are secret lives.
Right. If politicians could keep everything secret that they wanted to keep secret and only tell the world what they wanted to tell the world, they would be really happy people.
Yeah.
But that, of course, doesn't happen because of these opposition research teams and because of the press is always nosing around. And all you need is one bad headline, even if it really has no meaning and you really didn't do anything wrong, One bad headline and your campaign can go into the tank, and you may never recover from it. It's a tricky business, very tricky. You have to have a strong stomach and a strong hide, as anybody can see who reads the newspapers today.
Yeah, and the use of words, framing your conversation, creating the context that you want, the image that you want to project. Are you able to convey any of that sense in musical chairs?
I hope so. We writers tend to call that texture.
Yeah.
And texture is very important. That was actually something I had to learn after I'd written the first book. I can't remember who it was, but some agent or editor had said to me, you don't have enough texture. People can't visualize what room these people are standing in or what they do for work or whatever. So I never forgot that lesson, and I have tried to create a texture for all of my characters so that the reader gets to know them, not just as characters who speak and have dialogue, etc., but who they really are when they're home alone at night, who they really are when, in their private moments, etc. So one hopes that one creates the appropriate texture so that readers can really relate to the characters.
I'm a fan of Carl Reiner, Mel Brooks. Are you able to bring into the book that sense of comic relief? Or
well, it's funny you should ask because especially in Simple Truths, I thought I had a rather ironic way of putting some things, but I'm not so sure that my readers felt the same way. So I myself find myself laughing out loud sometimes when I'm writing. But I'll have to leave it to the readers to give me some feedback on whether or not I'm successful in some of the irony that I do try to bring into these books.
Yeah, Billy Crystal, he's another one who...
Oh, he's hilarious.
I know.
These are all hilarious people, and there's nothing I like better than laughing, although I am certainly not writing books that people can kind of laugh at. But I do have an ironic touch, at least I think so, and I think it makes its way into whatever it is I'm writing.
Yeah, in other words, you're painting a portrait. You're saying, here's a situation, and there's drama there. Some of it is just flat out stupidity and funny. Others are just, you want to cry. Oh my, I can't believe it.
It's true.
And you're covering all the range of emotion in both books, and that's hard to do. I mean, but that carries you through the book to the very end. You can't wait. You have to keep turning the pages. And audience, as I've said many times, when you find a good book, buy 5, buy 10. Gift them. Your books, Sheila Levine, have a adult framework. I think 30, 40s and up certainly would grasp most of it. I think under 30, there aren't many that are politically excited. There are some.
No, I think that's true. And let's put it this way: my 5 grandchildren are not allowed to read my books.
Yeah, they're not ready.
No, they're not ready.
Exactly. So life has to happen a little bit for you to have the backdrop. I remember Watergate. Okay,
Exactly.
I remember voting, and I was there when Vietnam was going on, and I served in the United States Army during that era, and had the fortunate pleasure of being stationed in Augsburg, Germany, instead of Vietnam. So there are certain things in my life going back to the 70s that I would remember and that I could reflect on and say, hey, this makes sense to me.
That's very true. And in addition to that, there are aspects in each of my novels, as there are in so many novels, of love and rejection and all of the human emotions that really just cut across any generational divide that for time immemorial people have been feeling. And it's that universality of and range of emotion that I think every writer strives for. There's no point in telling a story that doesn't have some universal meaning.
Right. You may you're going to read Musical Chairs and say, oh, that's Chris Christie.
Yeah, right. But it's not, but that's exactly right. In fact, there's no question I've had any number of people whom I know say to me, I know that character was based on me, and the truth is I had never even given them a thought. People read into books what they want to read into books. But there's one of the greatest challenges any writer has is to make his or her story universal in nature so that the readers not only are titillated, amused, and energized by the storyline, but they really feel that they find in it things which relate to their own lives and people they know, etc. And that is the ultimate challenge of any writer. And the best writers, one could name so many, Shakespeare, not starting with Shakespeare, but Shakespeare among the most prominent, Philip Roth, etc., on and on and on. The best writers do exactly that. They tell a particular story that people can relate to, but they universalize it, making it appropriate and understandable and emotional for the readers.
Yeah, and therapeutic for them.
And therapeutic. That's very true. That's very, very true. It's an interesting point.
And for you to relive, think about, reflect back on, and now create novels that express perhaps some of the joy, excitement, enthusiasm of those moments that you experienced, as well as the tragedy and the disappointment and frailty of the human character.
That's frailty of the human character is very well put. That's certainly true, and much of it is also, or a writer thinks much of it is made up. That doesn't really relate to anything that happened in particular in my life. But then at the end, when you think about it, you realize, as you started to say earlier in our conversation, writers must write about what they know about. It's not a question of choice. You say, whether it's good or bad. You can only write what you know about. It may take a different form than your own life, but the basic emotion is something that you've lived through and you know personally, or there's no way to write about it, which is why it's interesting to have lots of experiences. Interesting to be detained by the KGB. How would I know what that felt like unless it had actually happened to me?
Yeah.
So it's... Life is an endless wonder, thank goodness. And if you're a writer, then you want to communicate that.
Politics, for the most part today, in 2015, it is a career. You've been in politics maybe for 20 years or 30 years. You came up locally and you advanced and you moved and you kept and you worked your way to wherever you are now, right? And so there's a lifetime, a career behind you of having spoken in front of groups, pushed certain causes, and then there's the cultural changes that perhaps 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the nation felt and thought differently about things than they do today.
Well, if you just take the money issue, 20 years ago, it didn't cost anything remotely like what it costs now to get elected to the Senate or to, in fact, the presidency. The aspects of fundraising now are so sophisticated that it kind of boggles the imagination. And the amount of money that is required for people to become congressmen or senators or president is just unfathomable. I mean, it's hard to imagine how they could raise that much money and how they spend that much money. And that was not true 20 years ago. 20 years ago, you raised a certain amount of money and it was more or less in line with what was appropriate. You spent it, and that was that. But now there's no holds barred. Because of what the Supreme Court did, et cetera. And the money in politics now is really shameful and shocking.
Yeah, no one cared before. Oh, that's Ohio or that's Wisconsin. Who cares what's going on up there, right? But now,
I think that's true. But now you see what happened today. Just today, these Republicans writing to Iran saying that anything that any treaty signed isn't going to be any good for the next president, because the next president will void it. I mean, that kind of thing was unheard of really years ago. There seems to be also less respect in politics today. That is to say, one of the things that used to be a hallmark of politics years ago was a kind of courtliness from one politician to another. That's all gone. I mean, people are just really savage towards one another. And in my view, they've been particularly savage towards the president, this president. So,
I know. They used to get out and stay out. Now they get out and become TV advisors and personalities. So
that's true. And there's no question, they all get very high-paying jobs as lobbyists, even though they're not permitted to. They skirt around the law. And if you're an ex-politician and you haven't gone to jail, which is another thing that ex-politicians tend to do also, but you're definitely going to make a very good living for the rest of your life.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what do they pay? One speaking engagement. You get $1 million,
Yeah, they get a lot of money, right? A lot of money. That's one of the, arguments about Hillary, that she continues to take these very high-paid speaking engagements when, at this point, she and Bill certainly have enough money to see them through many lifetimes. So, It's an interesting question, but money in politics now is just the way it seems it's going to be from now on, and it's not a good thing. It's not a healthy thing for the country.
No, and it's not healthy when we lose our republic to democracy.
That's certainly true.
And not teach it. We're not teaching it civil or liberties, civil rights, civil responsibilities. Or maybe we're strong on the entitlement side, but weak on the obligation to assist, to maintain a strong community.
Well, there seems to be also a growing lack of compassion for unfortunate people who are physically ill or mentally ill. I mean, there is, for example, almost no mental health structure in this country. This was not true 20 years ago. 20 years ago, if you had a child who was manic depressive or schizophrenic, you could place them in a halfway home where they would be safe and sheltered and get their proper medication, etc. There are almost no facilities left in the United States of America for mentally ill people now. And I happen also to have an MSW, so I know a little something about this. And the kind of restrictions and deprivation that certain members of the Congress and the Senate would, if they could, put upon people who are simply poor, who want to work but can't find jobs, etc., is really, really shocking. It seems to be just a lack of compassion towards anyone who isn't making it with big bucks in the way that certain congressmen and senators think money is the most important thing. And that, I think, is very cruel. And I think eventually we've seen some rebellions already on this issue, people in the streets marching, et cetera, and I have some hope that both the racism that still exists in this country and the lack of compassion for the ill and the poor, I have some hope, although not a whole lot, but some, that people will rise up and make it known that they are people too. And that if they need help, then we're a big enough country and a rich enough country to help them.
Sheila Levine, thank you for coming on Artists First, supporting the arts, contributing your knowledge, your background, and experiences with our audience worldwide. Special thanks to military personnel serving overseas. Thanks for tuning into the broadcast this hour. You're always welcome, and certainly you'll want to visit Sheila Levine, Levin.com, the website, and purchase both books right away. If you're looking for a great gift idea for your mom, your dad, a college student, graduate student, a deep thinker, these are books for those who really apply themselves to reading. Well written, well done, both books. You're going to experience a little bit of a roller coaster ride, but in the end you'll be richly rewarded, so stay with it. It's a page turner. Musical chairs, relevant, and will be relevant 10 years, 15, 20 years from now, but get your copy today. Always a scandal in politics, and certainly we're going to be seeing that forever. It's never going to go away. Sheila, thanks for putting it together in such a fabulous fashion. You probably could have kept writing, and the book would be, 1,000 pages long.
I know when to stop. I know when I've got a good thing. I know when to call it quits.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. I really enjoyed this interview.
But you really had to say, hey, I have to put a limit on the length of a book. Is that a challenge?
No. It's not. It's very, very natural. The book has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. And somewhere around the middle of the book is when I start to map out the rest of the book. I use Post-its and put my characters down on them and make sure I've got all these characters moving forward towards the end of the book. And by the time I'm in the middle of a book, I know what the end is going to be, pretty much. And it's not at all hard to stop. In fact, it's a great, pleasurable feeling to know you've completed it.
What fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
And you're not having a difficult time locating your muse these days.
No, not these days. No.
So a beautiful place to live, plenty of time to write, not too many other obligations for that. And you're working on your third novel, and you hope to have that finished by the end of 2015?
Yes, I'm giving myself a year to write this one. Right.
So, audience, be sure to consult SheilaLevine.com in the coming months and of course, buy your copy today. I believe it's available on Amazon and
yes,
and
available everywhere, bookstores everywhere, Barnes and Nobles and Amazon on the internet, and many, many bookstores.
There you go. So it's out there, and if they don't have it at your favorite bookstore, encourage them to bring it in. The ISBN numbers are all at the website for your local bookstore, and they'll be happy they followed your advice. Bring in a few copies. With hundreds of thousands of books out there, audience, it's nice to know you can rely on Sheila Levine. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. Thank you for supporting the arts, for being our guest. Before I let you go, any concluding remarks for our audience or anyone out there on planet Earth you'd like to say hello to?
Well, not necessarily say hello, but to all of you aspiring writers. Many people come to me and say, I really want to be a writer. What do I have to do? And my answer is always the same. Sit yourself down in the chair and start writing. That's about the only advice I can give you aspiring writers. You'll find out soon enough if you're really a writer, and if you are, it's the greatest thing in the world.